Hi, everybody. Dan Illman, Mike Beer, the DRF race of the day for Friday, April the 12th, race number 9 at Keeneland, the Grade 1 Maker's Mark Mile. We're going on the turf, and we'll take a look at this field. It is a strong one. Even with the expected scratch of the number 7 Du Jour, you've got last year's Breeders' Cup Mile winner making his seasonal debut. The 4 Master of the Seas look good in the Breeders' Cup, but he might have to deal with some wet weather and a slow pace. He is a confirmed closer.
Yeah, he likes to sit and make one run, but that one run that he makes is really good, Dan. We saw him 3 times in North America last year. He was pretty good in all those races.
We're going to throw up the Timeform US pace projector because this is going to change with the 7 Du Jour likely out. And there's a chance that Chad Brown might scratch the 1 Equitized. Equitize is the only horse in this race seemingly with enough early gas to get to the front. He's not even a blazer. If he's out, there's a big edge to the 2 Emanuel, because we've seen what Emanuel can do when they leave him alone on the lead when he won the Pennine Ridge a couple of years ago.
Yeah, he's capable of going to the front here, especially if the pace is going to be slow. I guess, Dan, if the 1 does scratch from this race, and it seems like Du Jour is not going to run here either, I guess the key to the pace might be the other Appleby Godolphin horse, Naval Power, who I wouldn't say he's a speed, but he's a horse who could get forward. Or he had the chances to get forward in overseas a few times, and he did it. I feel like if those scratches do happen, you'll see the 3 go forward in this race.
Let's talk about the 1 Equitize, currently a questionable starter for this race. He's very lightly raced. He's 2 for 3 lifetime. The only loss came in his second lifetime start to Integration, who's also in this field, but it was only his second lifetime start, and it came off of a layoff. Here's his seasonal debut. First level allowance at Tampa Bay, the ability to stay close to a solid pace, then went 45 and change to the half, and then finishing it off in good-looking fashion as an odds-on favorite should. Now he steps way up in class, but if he's in this race, he's going to be close to moderate fractions.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see how everything shakes out for him here. If this is where they run, I would admit, Dan, when I first pulled the PPs, I saw him right there under the first horse I looked at. I got a little bit excited. I'm a big fan of this horse. I remember his debut early last year. To me, he looked like a horse who had a chance to be really good. The only loss there, that Hill Prince, he got bumped at the start. He got really rank in that race. And I would just give him a pass for that. The more you dig into these PPs, though, you realize it's a really tough spot for him, unfortunately. I'll tell you what, if he runs here, though, no matter what happens on Friday, he's a horse to keep an eye on down the line. He's got a chance to be really good.
The number 2, Emanuel, goes out for Todd Pletcher. Arad Ortiz, this horse is a multiple graded stakes winner with the tactical speed to take advantage if the race lacks any sort of pace. Now, there are times when Emanuel doesn't show up, as in the 4-star Dave 2 starts back when he disappointed at a short price, but he returned off of a lengthy layoff in good form in his seasonal debut. Here's the Grade 3 Canadian turf, going 1 mile and a 16th at Gulfstream Park. Emanuel looks strong in the stretch. He earns his usual solid 97 Buyer's speed figure, and he might get the right race flow and trip.
Yeah, he might. He was good in this race. He got a good trip in here, too. He's going to drift at the end of this race, but he's going to hold on here. It's a perfectly fine performance. I think it's also worth pointing out, Irad doesn't ride him all the time, but when he does ride him, this horse shows up. Irad's 3 for 4 on Emanuel in his turf races. So, I don't know. There are things to like, obviously. I'm not his biggest fan. I recognize that he could win this race, and maybe the pace makes you want to take a second look at him, Dan. I just kind of want other horses in here.
Trainer Charlie Appleby and Godolphin, they have 2 in here. Of course, they have the Breeders' Cup Mile winner, Master of the Seas. Naval Power is going to be a better price. Naval Power looks legitimate on paper. He is 6 for 7 lifetime, and he has a legitimate excuse for the 1 loss, which was in the 2022 Dewhurst. Supposedly, he bled that day. Now, he's obviously had his share of issues. Only 1 start in 2023, and then they put him away. And then this race, a Group 2 at Maidan. This is his first race as a gelding. He seemed like he was pulling really hard in the early stages, and they got him covered up, and I think that was key. And then he got a nice closer's trip. Once he gets to the outside, he's really rolling, and even though the horse kind of drifts in front of him a little bit in late stretch, he's kicking hard.
Yeah, I agree. This is a really strong finish that he puts in this race. There's the horse coming out in front of him right there. Just broke his momentum very briefly, but he just powers over the top of that horse. This is probably the best race he's ever run, Dan. He did it off of a really long layoff, and he did it after showing tons of potential as a really young horse. I mean, it was one good race after another for him before he bled in that Group 1. it's also worth noting, you mentioned only one start last year for this horse. He was really good in that race too. I mean, this horse has potential. You mentioned he was ranked early in that race, Dan. That's sort of been a habit of his. I wonder if this pace is slow and he gets a couple of scratches, they don't just let him go early.
Maybe they let him go early, or maybe he just then gets a little bit speed crazy and pulls. Maybe he is better sort of being tucked in behind, but the price is going to be right. And this horse does have ability. 6 for 7 lifetime, 1 for 1 as a gelding, 2 for 2 since the hood has been put on. Here's the horse everyone's going to be looking at, the 4 Master of the Seas. He shipped over here last year for Appleby. He won the Woodbine Mile going 1 turn. He just missed at Keeneland in the Turf Mile. It took a very good horse in up to the mark to nip him. And then in this race, the Breeders' Cup Mile, he got a really nice ride from William Buick. Outside post position, but didn't lose too much ground on the first turn. Swung widest in the stretch, and he comes with a flourish.
Yeah, I mean, he had a lot of ground to make up in the last quarter of a mile here, Dan. He's just going to erase the entire deficit, and he is just going to get up at the end of this race. But this is a really, really good performance. Listen, he won that Woodbine Mile last year, and he looked good winning that race, but that was like a terrible field. And so I didn't really know what to make of him. I wasn't totally sold on him. He didn't have any excuse when he lost here last October, but he ran a really good race that day, and it took a really good horse to beat him. I mean, listen, he's 4 to 5 on the morning line. He's clearly the horse to beat here.
Now you're going to have to take a short price on a horse that might have some question marks. Of course, he's dealing with a layoff. He might deal with ground that is less than firm, which might not be as ideal for him as a firm turf course. And of course, you're catching a 1-run closer in a race without much pace, but he is so talented. He wouldn't be a surprise as the horse to beat. I think Kubrick is very interesting for Chad Brown, Mike. Chad took his time with this horse. They got him. They gave him a lot of time. He returned to Tampa Bay in an allowance race going a mile, and he caught a race without a lot of pace. They went 47 to the half in a mile race, and he just keeps charging over the top of these horses to score. The third place finisher is a nice dirt horse, came back to run second in the Sir Shackleton with a 92 buyer. I think this horse is solid. It's a big step up in class.
Yeah, I agree. He did look good winning this race too, and it's just one of those races where you mentioned there was no real pace for him. They knew they were on the best horse, so they just sat on the outside the entire way and waited until it was time. And you saw what he did through the stretch. Really impressive. He's a half brother to Raging Bull, who Chad also trained. I think Raging Bull won this race several years ago too. So there's pedigree here. He looked good winning that race. It's not like he didn't have any form overseas. He ran some good races over there too.
Shirl's Spite won the Maker's Mark in 2022. It's his most recent victory, so it's been a little bit of a dry spell, but we know he likes the course. We know he likes a course with some give in it. They ran him in the Pegasus World Cup. A mile and an eighth might be pushing his distance a little bit, and a wide trip didn't hurt. I'd like to have seen him run a little bit better in that spot, however, but he's solid enough. But he's also a 1-run closer, isn't he?
Yeah, I don't know that he gets the right trip in this race. I do think he's handy enough to get a little bit more forward. And I feel like the good evidence for that, Dan, is 2 starts back at the Breeders' Cup. Now, he was no match for Master of the Seas that day, and that was good. That was like the good Johnny V stuff when you go back and watch that replay. I mean, he just gave this horse the most perfect trip in the world, within range, saving every inch of ground. The hole was there for him. And listen, Shirley Spite tried. He just wasn't good enough that day. But I can see him getting that kind of trip in here, especially if the pace is slow. And maybe he'll be able to do something with that.
The 7 du Jour, who was no match for Master of the Seas in the Breeders' Cup, came back to win the Kilroe. He's expected to scratch, however. Baffert didn't put him on the plane, according to our colleague Marcus Hirsch, which leaves us with the 8 Integration, who might very well be the key to this race. He might have the most upside of any horse. He won his first 3 starts, and he turned a lot of heads. And in the Pegasus World Cup, I'd like to urge everybody to go back and just click on the short comment and watch the trip. I love the way Tyler Gaffalione was able to kind of just settle him inside early. He kind of gave up the spot to the winner going into the first turn. Maybe Integration just isn't quick enough to find that spot. But then in the stretch, he's over and behind horses. He can't find a seam. And once he did late, he's running.
Yeah, all those things are true. You're right. Everybody should just go back and watch it for themselves and draw their own conclusions. But it just felt like he got a little unlucky there. And it's just not as disappointing as it may look on paper, even though he lost as the favorite. This horse is good, man. I don't know about you. I don't mind them cutting him back to the mile here. I think it's going to be fine for him. He is such a strong finisher. You know, I'm not going to sit here and suggest it's going to be easy for him to outkick a horse like Master of the Seas, but this horse has a chance to be, one of the best turf horses in the country this year. He's that good.
I agree. It might not be easy for him to outkick Master of the Seas, but he has a strong kick, as you mentioned, and he's likely going to get the jump on Master of the
Yeah.
Seas, turning into the stretch. Before we get to our top selections, please click the subscribe button on the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel for the latest DRF videos. Let's take a look at our top picks for the Maker's Mark. You're going with Naval Power, a horse that might have enough tactical speed to get close to the pace and has done very, very little wrong.
Just going to try to get the jump on the big favorite here, Dan. I think there's a chance that Naval Power has that kind of running style. Really like all of his races, save the one blemish there where he bled. All of his other races are good. And listen, Master of the Seas is a good finisher. Integration's a good finisher. This horse is too. You saw it on that replay we put up there. This horse can really fire through the stretch.
I respect him. I respect integration a great deal. He's the horse I'm afraid of. I just think that even if this race is run at a slow pace and they're all bunched up, it turns into a sprint for home. And I think Master of the Seas has a strong kick. Unfortunately, the price isn't going to be there. 4832 for me, 3481 for Mike. Grade 1 Maker's Mark Mile at Keeneland on Friday. Best of luck.